They said it could not be done. They said that there's no way you can make 100 ASMR videos in your room without being a loony. I've proved them wrong. Them being my imaginary haters. ASMR, is it really a hobby of solitude? Am I alone, or are we together? These are the existential questions that keep me awake at night, and I don't have any answers. But I do know that I often rail on, I often look down on, or talk about the dangers or perils of being or living with a large amount of solitude. Solitude, because here's why I think I've been a little judgmental, maybe overly judgmental. I think one, because I've been very solitude a lot in life, and I've seen the negative effects of it. But two, when I like being on the internet, this is like my favorite cafe, is the internet. I am seeing a lot of freaky personalities that I have to just assess through the lens of solitude and just not getting out and not being out in the world. One example of this is the incel personality type. And if you study in depth the incel personality type, you will find that they are engaging in something very weird. It's not just that maybe they're down on themselves or that they're alone or this or that. One of the hallmarks of the incel is their solitude, they're alone, but two, something really weird. The incel personality type tends to take statistical information, some statistic that describes a broad pattern or condition in the world, and then they apply that to their individual sense of self-worth. For example, you might hear an incel at any given moment talk about how the math, the numbers, show that there are more single men who would like female partners than there are single women who want male partners. So you see, the math dooms them, specifically them, to a life of misery. Oh my goodness. So you see that the person in isolation and in a vacuum might start to develop a worldview that has absolutely nothing to do with their lived experience and relies on the rationalization and the being, cognizing itself as objectively true. And as such, they are helpless victims of society. So I've encountered, this is one version, right? This is the most messed up pack of Pokemon cards you can open, and there's incel. But there's other kinds of, I would say, deeply neuroticized, strange personality types that we just call being chronically online, and they tend to demonstrate degrees of looniness or nuttiness or ridiculousness within them. So I have a very soft, empathetic, resonant part of me for loners and weirdos. I love lone wolf media. So any kind of man who has been atomized and is now alone in society, we know the consequences of that. We know it because it's in our media. But like, I love Nightcrawler. I like the movie Her. Like, these are some of my favorite movies. These movies about men who are kind of lonely or alone or in their own kind of systems, emotional systems, and ways of thinking. So anyway, all of this to say is that I often talk about that I think people who react with self-help that encourages them to be alone maybe don't need to do that, because this kind of prepackaged monk mode where you're like some samurai warrior or some ancient scholar who needs to be alone to get in touch with discipline and whatever. For example, David Goggins, is that this guy's name? I tend to think of these people as shame-based, acting from a deep place of shame and compensating with intense ritual, an intense amount of control over their bodies, their schedules, and they tend to display rigidity of thinking and lack of adaptability and a high amount of judgment toward people. It's like, in order to be the guy who is like locked in on discipline and grabbing his life, by the shirt collar, you have to be absolutely demonizing other types of people. So this video, however, I'm going to be setting that aside because I think that that's pretty clear that as a society we know the extreme dangers of being alone and what can happen to the brain in isolation. This is clear. There's been many studies on happiness, and we kind of see how important it is to be around good company, not just any company. But I also want to talk about being alone and finally give that a fair shot, because I think that we manifest healthily with high quality social time and high quality solitude. High quality social time is being around those people that you can, you really feel the self come out. It's being of use, working in a group, working in a team to make the world better. It's just those little friendly, even small talk encounters. There's all kinds of healthy ways of having some socializing, but some is like the high quality is like fantastic. And what is high quality solitude? What is solitude? Is there a way that that can be healthy? I really want to give that a fair shake. And so to do that, I want to mention some of my own points, because I tend to have solitary hobbies and passions. Like everything I've ever done has been solitary. Drawing, anything related to art, reading, thinking. I'm alone doing that. So I like being alone. I like being around people. But I also want to mention some things that I read and I didn't ever really think about until reading a book. I guess what the book is called. You'll never guess. This is Solitude. Solitude by Anthony Storr. Storr. Anthony Storr. Solitude. It's kind of on the cover is this guy. He's rowing on the river alone. He is alone. Yes. I really enjoyed this book. I don't know what I rated it on Goodreads, doesn't matter. My little rating doesn't matter, but I read this book and I thought it did a fantastic job of keeping me in check and helping me find the balance, where at first I really resisted this book because it was trying to explain to me that there are lives that are good, that don't involve close personal relationships. And I was like, what are you talking about? I don't understand. And the book said, well, let me explain. And it went on to talk and I think paint a very human picture of what many types of lives have looked like, and how, an intimate relationship, typically a partner, kind of came to really be the I guess the utmost high hallmark of success and happiness and health and well-being, and how there are many, many other ways to attain well-being and to be okay in the world. So I stuck with it. I heard him out, and I think I'm walking away with a much more humanistic and flexible understanding of being alone. Here's the big thing that I was like, oh, wait, this makes sense. Is he brought up, he's a psychologist, or was, this is old, this is an older book, and to contextualize it, he is responding greatly to Freud at the time of this writing. Like the 70s and the 80s being kind of a boom in our understanding of the inner workings of man. And pretty much he is describing that Freud and Freudian psychoanalysis really painted this exalted picture of the person who is able to obtain satisfaction in this close, intimate relationship. And he said, wait a minute, and talked about the understanding that it seems like in order to be alone, to be healthily alone, you need to actually have good attachment to people, which is kind of a paradox. That if you have very good attachment and you feel very secure with people, right, especially as a child, you feel safe. And because you feel safe, you can go out into the world alone and explore it. So, funny enough, he was talking about how we need people to be alone. You need to be safe so you can relax alone. And I thought that was fantastic, because after that, it opens the door to, hey, you can be alone, but do you have healthy ways of relating to people behind you? Yes, no. And not that this should be an algorithm, but it made me think of the incel, and it made me think of the monk mode people. And that might be an interesting way of looking at that, which is that if you need to get down to business, you need to be alone and reflect on things and work on yourself, or if something in your life is making you uncomfortable, is there something in your social life and your relationships that you need to repair first? Or is that already there? If you have that support system, if you have a way of kind of regulating your self-esteem because you've been mirrored, because you've been supported, then being alone might be very beneficial. But if the source of your pain is this real inability to adapt to people, maybe it's good looking at those relationships. The book does, though, go on to talk about situations in which those relationships are not good. And a person like Kafka, these historical figures in society have been really at odds with the world and at odds with people, and have struggled with themselves and with mental illness, who have needed solitude and have used solitude to create rich inner worlds and create works of art, works of literature that are a synthesis of their pain, that wrestle with the human condition, and then reflect it back to us, people reading, and they're able to then contribute deeply to meaning, to the human experience, our understanding of what it means to be alive and what it means to be a person. Now, that is something that I've been interested in a long time, which is how people's inner life facilitates the material world. Literature is one way. If you have a very rich fantasy life, you're probably alone a lot, because there are certain types of thinking that it's hard to do that if you're constantly engaged with other people. So he rightly talks about the utility of being alone so that you can daydream and process and use that time to create. And this book, which is named Solitude, ended up being more a discussion about creativity and about what it means to create something and how solitude facilitates thinking and reflecting. I do think that that draws into question the concept of pretty much if you escape or if you generate. So, say you're alone and you are in solitude. I think one of the first things it's easy to think about is, well, when you're alone, you're just gonna fill the space with videos or with like short form videos, social media, and ingesting things. Which is like, of course, because you need to have experiences alone. But there's a difference, I think, between really spiraling in that and having some intention with that. I think that comes back to that high quality alone time. Are you spiraling in rumination, worry, anxiety, or when alone, getting in touch with those feelings and processing them on a deeper level, creating something with them, writing, or just reflecting and processing, and kind of moving through those emotions and allowing yourself to grieve, or these types of emotional processes. I first traveled alone, now that I'm thinking about it, because it's not that you have to be a bedroom dweller, but there's all kinds of things like traveling alone, eating at a restaurant alone. That has always been so hard for me, eating at a restaurant alone. Wow. I actually did that at a hotel here in the UK. I ate breakfast because it was included with the room every morning alone. And I would go to this dining room and it was horrible. The whole time it was horrible. I made myself do it, but I would have coffee and then they would bring out like a little standard breakfast, and I sat at this with white tablecloths, and everybody else in the little dining room was tiny. This was like an inn. This was like a ye old inn from the medieval period. There was like, anyway, I ate breakfast alone, and it was a nightmare, and it never got better. I tried to take a book, but I could not escape the feeling of being watched. So I was alone amongst people and having a miserable time because I actually wasn't alone. That makes sense? Sometimes when you're alone and you're just plagued with anxiety because you can feel the unspoken So everyone else was like a couple, and it was very quiet, and I felt like I could not disappear because it was so quiet. So that ended up being horrible. But I have traveled alone before, and it ends up being a very good experience because you do get to reflect and figure yourself out without being completely isolated, like in a room. So, probably the easiest thing for me is going to get a coffee out alone. So I go for a walk alone and sit in a cafe and read alone. So I think even those forms of solitude are healthy, and they can kind of help erase some of the concerns of getting a little mentally odd, because you're just in a cafe having a cappuccino and listening to music and thinking of fantasies and really processing pain. You know, if you're daydreaming, if you're trying to escape from something, if you can find a way to then channel that into generating something and processing. So there's like escape. But if you can escape to reconnect, if that makes sense, and this book helped me kind of figure out that mental process. That is truly like, we go into solitude, we escape from contact, communication, so that we can then process and then we can reconnect. And the creative process looks similar to that, where you've experienced life and maybe there's been uncomfortableness, there's been pain. Then you go out and you can apply that in solitude. One of the things though, and this brings me back to my incel, is that he argues that in those cases of people who are under extreme stress and there's an inability for whatever reason to really connect with people intimately, that if they're having small interactions that are positive, that's good. And if they're creating things or writing things, that sometimes might be the best outcome. And it might not be a bad life. And it's worth looking at that with some understanding and some kindness, I think. Now, anyone like an incel who uses that pain to lash out at others, absolute freak. But there are plenty of other people who are isolated or they're lonely, and they don't do that. They don't turn that into anger, and that is worth considering. And this book really challenged me on a lot of different points. This review I like a lot. It says it's an important, even revolutionary book if it saves naturally non-sociable people from anxiety about not belonging and enables them to come to terms with their solitude. It will have done a notable human service. Yeah, I think that's really nice. I feel that to be true, and I think this did a good job of getting to somebody like me who is kind of half open to these ideas, but not all the way, and really allowed me to put down some of my idealism and come to terms with the fact that, there are many forms of solitude that even I might not understand. But it's people just in their own world, doing their own thing. And even if they don't have close personal relationships, they're not hurting anyone. And in many cases, they're probably highly creative and very smart. Yeah, this really kind of opened my worldview a little bit. And I appreciate it for that. to me warrants a reread. This will probably be a reread. It's not, I found it a little bit clunky, but, yeah. It says that, we don't pay enough attention to other forms of satisfaction in life. So when we look at people, now this, yes, we look at people who are without children or without partners, and we say, oh my gosh, it must be so horrible. But there are many people who choose that. And there are many people who are in that, and they're like, it's not that bad. You know? Because they're plugged in many other ways, or in their solitude comes a profound sense of peace, comes projects, and yet we have to look at that. Yeah, he says the capacity to be alone is a sign of maturity, and that I agree. The big thing for me is having solitude be a marker of health, which is definitely a marker of health, I think. A lot of us have been there or have known people who cannot be alone and will hop from relationship to relationship or friend group to friend group, just unable to be alone with their own thoughts, or kind of process the world around them. So that we need solitude to regulate ourselves and to check in with ourselves and to kind of regather and saying, am I making my choices from a healthy place, or am I just terrified to be alone? Which I think is wonderful, and I see that a lot, especially in younger people. Like when I was a teacher, you see all kinds of things play out in the classroom, all kinds of social dynamics. But solitude was definitely one. It was like people's ability to make friends, to get along, to adapt. And then there are people who it was like a little more alone or atomized, but making amazing things. When I was younger, I was one of those. I was more quiet and withdraw, and that was my kind of category. And so as a teacher, when I saw kids like that, they would get a little bit of special attention, because I knew that they were being creative and that they probably have very rich inner worlds. And it's about helping that come out and helping them be creative. So I really enjoyed Solitude. It's given me a lot to think about, mostly differentiating for me the aims of solitude, whether it's chosen, if you're choosing to be alone, whether it's imposed upon you by society, what your narrative is around that, being an indicator of health, helping me think through what kinds of solitude I'm familiar with, what kinds that I'm judging, what kinds should be judged, should be labeled, wow, this is really bad. He talks about solitary confinement, and imposed solitude on people, all kinds of things. So I highly recommend it. But ultimately, it does paint a picture of there are lots of ways to be a person, and it's more just a defense of solitude because it leads to creativity. And it's worth noting that as a culture, I think now we have a better balance of these things. So we know the importance of being alone, we know the importance of being social, and we're able to balance these, I think, better than the world he is describing, which again kind of coincides with a real strong trend in psychoanalysis to heavily emphasize the person's ability to adapt based on their childhood, and the marker of that being in intimate close relationships. That's just me rambling a little bit about solitude in this book. As a strange way of of celebrating 100 videos. I don't know if I've done 100 anything in my life. I've maybe done, I would say maybe 15 push-ups in my entire life. But I have made 100 ASMR videos. Similar to the one I ate at that restaurant alone, at that little inn, and I ate breakfast, I was uncomfortable by the fact that I was not mentally alone. However, ASMR is a great example of the complete opposite of that, where I feel not alone in the best way possible. I think that's the interesting cognitive flip. Similar to when you are doing other things creatively, you end up kind of being plugged into something, and that type of solitude is so different and it's so generative. So even though I make YouTube videos in my room alone, I end up feeling like it's, weirdly enough, one of the most social things that I do. So I really love it, and I appreciate being here. 100 videos. There's going to be 100 more videos. What in the world? I hope I don't neurologically degenerate from solitude. You will know in my videos if I do, because it would get weirder in theme, and I would be saying things that are a little weird. So if I start going, don't let me get into guru territory. If I start really hitting the non-duality, that we're all one thing, we're all connected, and if I start wearing beads, if you see me wearing beads, I'm in trouble. If I start talking about non-duality, I'm in big trouble. Don't let me do it. Yes, I think that's it. I don't intend to. I try and get out every now and then, so doing good. Yeah, thank you for being a room dweller with me for all these videos. I am so excited for more. It's unreal. I have a huge list of ASMR videos I want to make, and I will be making them. I will be doing that, so I just wanted to say thank you. I think it's very exciting. I have a coffee, but I'm probably gonna go buy myself a pumpkin spice latte. A pumpkin spice latte to celebrate 100 videos. I think that's weird and cool. So, yeah, thank you so much again for being here with me today. I cannot wait to see you in the next video for 101, the 101 video. I will see you in the 101 video. So, thank you so much. Good night if you're gonna sleep, and goodbye. Goodbye.